Good evening, friends. Today I'm going to talk on virtual biopsy by molecular imaging. Next, next, next slide, please. Next slide. Molecular imaging is non-invasive in vivo imaging, non-invasive visualization and measurement of biological activity. So we, in the living subject, we inject some particles and we can image what is happening inside. Next slide, please. Can you see anything here? No, the previous slide. Yeah, can you see anything here? If you see closely observe, there is a green dot on this black shadow. There is a green dot on the black shadow. Next slide, please. You see now there is a black dot on a light green shadow. So what is happening is, in the previous slide, next slide, next slide, next. See, what is the best imaging is the high tumor to background ratio or high pathology to normal ratio. In the first slide also, there was a green dot, but the background was black. Because of that, you were not able to identify easily. But in this slide, you can easily see there is this dot over the black shadow, cannot be seen. Whereas in this slide, you can easily see the black dot over a green shadow. That is, tumor to background or signal to noise ratio should be high in a good imaging technique. The best imaging technique is where there is a very high signal and no noise, which is practically impossible. But we should have a high tumor to background ratio or high signal to noise ratio. The higher the signal to noise ratio, the better the quality of imaging. Whenever you have a good imaging technique, then you can easily identify the scan. The problem is, if you see FDG PET in brain tumors, the FDG also show brain or rest of the brain also shows uptake, and the tumor also shows uptake. Because of this low signal to noise ratio, FDG PET is not ideal. Whereas if you take a fluoroethyl tyrosine PET or fluorodopa PET or this time the background is less, the rest of the brain doesn't show significant uptake, whereas the tumor is showing uptake. So what is the evolution in imaging is higher signal to noise ratio. The same concept holds for your radiotherapy also. The radiotherapy, what we want is, we want more and more dose to the tumor and less dose to the surrounding. In chemotherapy also, more and more drug concentration in the tumor. Like you have trastuzumab emtansine, where the drug is delivered only to the tumor, not to the rest of the this thing. That is the same thing in transarterial chemoembolization. We can give more dose. So this is regional therapy, is regional this thing. We are planning for more dose to the tumor. Like that only, in imaging, we should see that the signal to noise ratio is very, very high. The higher the signal to noise ratio, the more the next slide. Next slide. Yeah. Actually, why molecular imaging? The problem starts at a molecular genetic level. Suppose BRCA is there. The problem is in the genetic level. But where are we imaging? We are imaging at a biochemical change, where there is a CA1 deviation, all these things. We have a physiological change. The patient starts coughing, and we have anatomical change that we can detect on the most of us are imaging at sonography, then we are taking physiological, then biochemical, then we are going to. So
Sir, your audio is not clear.
Hello. So actually we are now is it fine? Is it fine now? Hello. Is it fine now?
Little better, sir.
Yeah. So though the problem is starting at genetic level, we are only diagnosing when the anatomical change is happening. It should be the other way around. But what is the problem? The opponents of this idea, they say that because there will be a lead time bias, unnecessarily we will be treating those patients who may not manifest as a disease. That's why. But once the disease is diagnosed, or once there is a risk in this thing, then we should start have a cancer, we don't know which every cancer is not the same. Each genetic presentation will represent a different pathology, and each one will be cured by different drugs. So molecular genetic imaging is the future in oncology. Let us go to the next slide. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. What are the targets for molecular imaging? The targets are receptors, proteins, transporters. Then there will be phagocytosis, enzyme activity, protein synthesis. All these can be targeted. Each thing, the glucose metabolism is targeted by FDG. Receptors, somatostatin receptors, phagocytosis, your sulfur colloids can be used for phagocytosis. Enzyme activity, the glutamate carboxypeptidase enzyme, that is PSMS can be used for enzyme activity. Amino acid synthesis, this is used for protein synthesis is used for this thing, amino acid transporters, L-amino acid transporters, and reporter gene expression. All these can be DNA, RNA synthesis. All these can be targets for molecular imaging. The reporter genes, that is example is TERT, telomerase reverse transcriptase. All these can be targeted by molecular imaging. We'll go one by one and how it can be integrated to the cancer. Next slide, please. So already I spoke in the last class. Again, I am speaking so that in last class my slides could not be read. Alpha decay is, there are 6 modes of decay, and the first one is fission. Fission cannot be used in regular nuclear medicine practice, and it is used only in the reactors to produce nuclear radioisotopes. We have 5 types. Alpha decay, it is in heavily charged by heavy ions. There is a decay by alpha particle. 2 protons and 2 neutrons are emitted out of the nucleus. So the atomic number decreases by 2, molecular weight decreases by 4. This type of alpha decay, there is high linear energy transfer. The higher the linear energy transfer, the higher the efficacy, because it can cause double strand breaks at a small intervals, leading to the higher amount of DNA damage. So the alpha particles, nuclear with alpha particles, then emerge this thing because of its high linear energy transfer. Next is beta decay. This happens in those radionuclides which are neutron rich. A neutron is converted into a proton with the emission of electron. This electron emitted out of the nucleus is called as beta particle. The atomic number increases by 1 because there is a conversion of a neutron to proton. Neutron and proton are nothing but neutron is charged neutral. There are subatomic particles which are charged. If the positive charge equals to the negative charge, then it is called charge neutral. Whereas if the positive charge is more than the negative charge, it is called proton. So once there is a neutron is converting to a proton, there is a emission of a negative charge. The negative subatomic particle, similar to that of electron, coming out of the nucleus is called as beta particle. The gamma decay. The gamma decay is nothing but when there is no change in atomic number or mass number, but only change in the energy state, that is gamma decay. The beta decay, beta particles and alpha particles are used for therapy. Gamma particles are used for diagnostics. And the another thing is positron. When it happens in proton-rich radionuclides, both positron and electron capture happen. Positron emission and electron capture happen in proton-rich radionuclides. The proton-rich radionuclides, the proton converts to a neutron and emits a positive charge particle. The positive charge electron is called positron. Positron, positive charge electron. Atomic number is increased by 1 because the neutron, atomic number decreases by 1 because the proton is converted into neutron, whereas atomic mass doesn't change. In electron capture also, the atomic number decreases by 1 because there is the K shell electron which is present near to the nucleus is absorbed and the proton converts into a neutron. The charged proton becomes a charged neutral particle, atomic particle. That's why the atomic number decreases by 1, but the mass number doesn't change. Alpha and beta particles are used for therapy. Gamma is used for diagnostic purposes. positron emission, that is the positron is used in PET-CT cameras, gamma is used in SPECT cameras, and electron capture is used in when there is emission of this X-ray. Sometimes electron capture radionuclides are also used for diagnostic purposes. The positron emission is classically used in PET, that is positron emission tomography. Next slide, please. So imaging modalities. The anatomy, you have X-ray, CT, MRI, and ultrasound. Physiological, you have optical imaging, PET, SPECT, MR spectroscopy, and functional MRI. Metabolic, only PET, SPECT, and MR spectroscopy. And molecular imaging, also we can use PET and SPECT. Whereas MR, so what is the difference between an X-ray and a gamma ray imaging? In X-ray, the machine is the source of the radiation, and it is called, because it is a transmission, the patient is not the patient, or the imaging object is not the source of radiation, whereas machine is the source of radiation. In X-ray units, it emits X-rays and this is transmitted. So we are seeing where it is transmitted and it is not transmitted, dense particles will not be able to transmit. In gamma imaging, patient is the source of radiation and it emits radiation, so it is detected on detectors. This is called as gamma imaging. So this is the difference. This is a transmission scan and an emission scan. Transmission scan is good for anatomy. Emission scan is good for physiology. So we are combining both, that is SPECT-CT and PET-CT. So it is a combination of both emission and transmission scan. Next slide, please. Annihilation. I already said the positive electron cannot be allowed to survive in the regular matter. So it combines with this equally charged electron and it annihilates to form 511 keV, two 511 keV photons which travel in opposite direction, and these are detected by a camera. That camera which is used to detect this is called positron emission tomography. Tomo means three-dimensional. Next slide, please. So this is called as coincidence imaging. They are traveling in opposite direction. They are monitored by an electron. If the coincidence is present, then they register event. If the coincidence is not there, then it will not be registered as event. There are three types of this thing: true events, random events, and scatter events. So the quality of a image is directly proportional to noise equivalent count rate. From the beginning of my talk, I am emphasizing the any machine's ability to decrease the noise and increase the signal is its measure of a good quality machine. Whenever if you are buying a PET-CT machine, ask the vendor what is the noise equivalent count rate. So the higher the noise equivalent count rate, the higher the quality of the image. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah, era of hybrid imaging. It is both the first one is the transmission scan, CT. Then the next one is a emission scan. So the combination of transmission and emission scan fused will be PET-CT and SPECT-CT. But the difference here, the new, it is a technique which we are using presently. The first CT will be done, then PET will be done, then there will be fusion. So the problems we can encounter here are because in between CT and PET, the patient may move. So you will have movement artifacts. But if we use simultaneous registration like in PET-MR, these movement artifacts can be decreased. So, and especially the bladder filling in the cases of cervix and all, when you are using PET-CT RT planning, you should ask the nuclear medicine to do a full bladder or whatever bladder capacity you want. That is the problem. If you synchronize properly with the nuclear medicine person and imaging is done properly, so the PET-CT RT planning will be good, especially wherever there is movement artifact or because of the bladder and bowel filling, there can be change in the volumes. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah, this is how a PET-CT camera looks. All of you know it. Next slide, please. Next slide. Why virtual biopsy? See, if you have a patient of NSCLC, non-small cell lung cancer, then even if it is EGFR positive, some patients respond and some patients do not respond. Even if you have some breast cancer, some tumor is ERPR positive, you start doing hormonal manipulation. Some lesions respond, some lesions do not. So there is something called as intra-tumor heterogeneity. The intra-tumor or heterogeneity or intra-lesional heterogeneity. The same tumor and same metastasis are not same. Because of the intra-tumor heterogeneity, then there is a need for virtual biopsy. Next slide, please. Intra-tumor heterogeneity and branched evolution revealed by multi-region sequencing. This is the future now already being practiced in some centers. So based on that, based on the PET-CT, we can say whether there is tumor heterogeneity is there or not. But for this, we have to use multiple radiopharmaceuticals. Let us go one by one. Next slide. Next slide. Can provide non-invasive, quantitative, longitudinal insights into whole body tumor characterization and drug behavior, is relevant to guide rational drug and combination therapy development. Multiple radio tracers can be used to interrogate the tumor in the same patient. Suppose neuroendocrine tumor, you all will be knowing FDG as well as somatostatin receptor. For especially gliomas, we use FDG and F18 dopa. And we consider molecular imaging traces as companion diagnostic tests. That's why if you have a low-grade glioma, it will not be FDG-AV8, whereas it will be F-dopa-AV8. It depends again on IDH mutation and all those things. Example, as a simple example I'm saying. So if you combine imaging with a F-dopa and FDG, then you will get an excellent overview of the extent of the tumor. So molecular imaging will definitely help in characterization of the tumor, as well as it can see how the tumor is responding and all. Example, in CT scan, you have a lytic lesion. If lytic is becoming sclerotic, it's suggestive of response, but it doesn't always, it is not that, it will not be, it is not always the thing in other solid lesions. So let us go one by one, how we can evolve. It is a beautiful insight. Next slide, please. See, tumor heterogeneity, guiding biopsy to the relevant site. See, a new therapy is formulated. Exon 11, this is a pre-treatment scan, this is a post-treatment. This is a pre-treatment scan, there is a supraclavicular node, right? Supraclavicular node. And exon 17, there is a mutation in exon 11. The tumor which was showing exon 11 mutation responded, whereas the tumor which is showing exon 17 did not respond. So differential response to therapy may indicate a new mutation. At that time, you again do a biopsy from there and treat it accordingly. Somebody asked whether FDG and technetium, I am talking about PET-CT. Technetium is a gamma isotope. FDG is a positron isotope. Next slide, please. So more specific mechanisms of tumor biology, tumor heterogeneity, phenotype and genotype can be measured earlier with molecular imaging rather than waiting for the tumor size to shrink or grow or for tumors to appear. See, suppose this is in GIST. Gleevec is nothing but imatinib. 1 month on Gleevec, you are seeing response. 14 months, again you are seeing the lesion. So secondary resistance, that is exon resistant. So there is an exon, GIST exon 11 and exon 11 resistant. So once you are using, there will be metabolic rebound once you stop. So this is where PET-CT will help, and you can take a biopsy from. And when you do this, so we will know which to target, whether what we are targeting is adequate or not. I will not go more into depth. That we once we finish the class, we can go in depth. Next slide, please. How do we do virtual biopsy by PET-CT? Identifying all the hallmarks of cancer. We can say this is the hallmark of cancer. So this is what you do. So this is how we image. Next slide, please. See, these are the cancer hallmarks. If you have gone through your textbook, there are classically we are taught sustained proliferative signaling, evading growth inhibitors, and avoiding immune destruction, enabling replicative immortality, then tumor-induced inflammation or new landmarks, and activating invasion and metastasis is a existing hallmark. Inducing angiogenesis is an existing hallmark. Genomic instability and mutation are the emerging hallmark. And resisting cell death is an already available hallmark. And deregulating cellular energetics is an emerging hallmark. Specific cell antigens, this is also there since beginning. So in the hallmarks of cancer can be classified as present from the beginning, if you are classically taught, and the emerging. So I'll say how we image each hallmark of cancer. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. The classical hallmarks of cancer are sustained proliferative signaling, evading growth suppressors, activating invasion and metastasis, enabling replicative immortality, inducing angiogenesis, and resisting cell death. Let me take through all the 6 one by one. Next slide, please. Sustained proliferative signaling. Next slide, please. Self-sufficiency in growth signaling. See, EGFR, nothing but epidermal growth factor receptor. The epidermal growth factor receptor, you know that we are already using in many agents. The durvalumab, which you use in lung cancer, and all these target cetuximab, which was previously used in head and neck cancers, and now also some people use epidermal growth factor receptor can be labeled with zirconium-89 cetuximab. This presence of elevation of epidermal growth factor receptor, which is commonly seen in non-small cell lung cancers, colonic cancers, and all. So these can be targeted, and we will know which patient is having more EGFR signaling, who can be benefited by anti-EGFR molecules like cetuximab, or EGFR can be treated with TKIs like erlotinib, geftinib, and all. Next comes HER2/neu. You know, if the tumor is HER2/neu 2+, 3+, 2+, you send for another study. But if your HER2/neu is overexpressed in cancer metastatic sites or not, we can image through trastuzumab. HER2/neu zirconium-89 trastuzumab can be used to identify whether the patient is expressing, the patient metastases are expressing human epidermal growth factor receptor or not. Estrogen receptors, fluoroestradiol, F18 estradiol, binds to estrogen receptors. We will know whether it is luminal A, luminal B based on the and HER2/neu overexpression by using imaging in vivo. You can say I can get it on tissue for 1500. Why you should spend? Exactly, but you cannot sample all the metastases. The classical reason, if the tumors had followed textbook, there is no need of molecular imaging. Because the tumors don't read textbooks, you need molecular imaging. And one lesion may express some way and the other lesion may not. To know the intra-tumor heterogeneity, we need molecular imaging. Next slide, please. Self by receptor expression. Next slide, please. Androgen receptor, it is fluorodihydroxytestosterone. Somatostatin receptor, gallium-68 dotatate. These are the receptor expression which we use. Androgen receptors, we know that prostate cancer can be hormone, castration refractory or castration sensitive. We once this after CRPC also, there will be after castration also some rise in PSA. We don't know whether it is hormone refractory or hormone sensitive, because if it is hormone sensitive, we can still use enzalutamide, albuterol, and all those things. So if we want to know whether it is androgen receptor expression or not, we can do a FDHT scan. Next is somatostatin receptor scan. Last class also I spoke gallium-68 dotatate. So somatostatin binds to it is octreotide. This is nothing but tate is an analog of octreotide. Dota is a chelating agent. Gallium-68 is a radionuclide emitter, positron emitter. Next slide, please. Next slide. So 68-year-old patient with CRPC. All CRPCs are not HRPC. See, the castration refractory doesn't mean it is not having. There can be androgen receptor splice variants. There can be androgen receptor mutation. With low level of testosterone also, it is causing tumor multiplication. So it is a biomarker. It can use for patient stratification. It can be used for using other, what I mean to say is other drugs like enzalutamide, abiraterone, and any newer hormonal manipulators. It is a clinically actionable test. Precision medicine, FDHT shows intense uptake in the skeletal lesions. So saying that it is castration refractory means even at the low levels of testosterone, low basal levels of testosterone, which are either produced by the adrenal gland, this level is not sufficient. So we can go for the drugs like abiraterone, which stop the production of testosterone even from the adrenal gland. Next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah. The regulation of cell growth and hormone release. See, this is about somatostatin receptor binding. So, somatostatin binds to somatostatin receptor. This, instead of somatostatin, we are using a peptide. This peptide, human octreotide, is a small peptide. Each contains 8 amino acids. Human somatostatin contains 14 amino acids. This phenylalanine, tryptophan, lysine, threonine. If you replace one of them with amines and other amino acid, then we can say this octreotide as a good one, where we can easily label with gallium and tota, where a chelating agent can be used. This is NOC, TOC and TATE. Last class everybody was asking NOC, TOC and TATE. Depends on the amino acids which we are replacing, and using aldehyde groups, and N-phthalalanin is in replacing the phenylalanine, then it becomes NOC. TOC is alcoholic group addition and TATE is aldehyde group addition. Next slide, please. Next. So you know what is Werner-Morrison syndrome. See, this is Werner-Morrison syndrome is nothing but WADA syndrome you would have read in your MBBS days. Watery diarrhea, echlorhydria and hypokalemia. This is because of a small tumor secreting vasoactive intestinal peptide. This vasoactive intestinal peptide, the tumor which is having secreting vasoactive intestinal peptide secretes VIP, can cause a lot of secretory diarrhea. These tumors express somatostatin receptors, which can be imaged using gallium dotatate. If they are metastatic, lutetium dotatate can be used for therapy. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah, Zollinger-Ellison syndrome. You will be knowing it is simple. It is a part of MEN1, watery diarrhea, Zollinger, or a part of MEN1 is multiple endocrine neoplasia of 1, where you have parathyroid, pituitary, and pancreatic adenomas. So, in Zollinger-Ellison syndrome, their presentation will be gastric ulcers at unusual sites and a pH of less than 2, diarrhea. When there is increased serum gastrin levels, more than 3000 picograms, and especially serum gastrin should be correlated along with the acid level. If the pH is more, that could be because of atrophic gastritis. Also, the gastrin levels can be high. So, to differentiate, it is presence of gastrin level, pH less than 2, then it could be because of the tumor, which is nothing but gastrin secreting tumor. These express somatostatin receptors, and this we are using. This is again we are imaging one hallmark. Next slide, please. So we are using somatostatin receptor, a patient presented with atypical ulcers and elevated serum gastrin levels. Then we had detected this clearly a somatostatin receptor expression in the gastrinoma triangle. This is a tumor in the somatostatin expressing somatostatin. After the excision, the patient was completely symptom free. Next slide, please. Next, yeah, the flip-flop phenomenon. It is a beautiful. The poorer the differentiation, the higher the hypoxia-inducible factor. Because of the higher the hypoxia-inducible factor, it will be intensely FDG aware, whereas the well-differentiated ones are somatostatin receptors. The same thing happens in thyroid cancer. The poorer the differentiated thyroid cancer, the higher the FDG uptake. The well-differentiated ones are show iodine uptake. Next slide, please. So you see there is a tumor on FDG. Only the 2 lesions are showing uptake, whereas on gallium dotatate multiple lesions are seeing uptake. This based on the heterogeneity. The intra-tumor. What I am trying to emphasize is intra-tumor heterogeneity. The more the tumor heterogeneous, the more the role of molecular imaging. This will not respond to octreotide. that is long Sandostatin LAR, but this will respond to Sandostatin LAR. So when you have a heterogeneous tumor, you can take your call on treatment based on the intra-tumor heterogeneity. That's why we need molecular imaging. So that we'll choose. Based on this FDG and SSTR, we have a net PET score. When we have a low net PET score, that is FDG non-avid somatostatin receptor avid, we will treat with Sandostatin. And if it is progressive on Sandostatin, we treat with lutetium dotatate. If it is both FDG and somatostatin receptor avid, we give chemo PRRT. If it is only FDG avid and not somatostatin receptor avid, we treat with chemotherapy. Next slide, please. So we can choose the therapy based on the metabolic signature. I've already spoken negative FDG, negative SSTR. It is a curative, that is nothing is left. P1, negative FDG, positive SSTR, interpretation Ka index less than 2, and we can use Sandostatin LAR, or if progressing on Sandostatin LAR, you can use lutetium dotatate. Mildly FDG positive, strong SSTR, PET, chemo PRRT. P3 also the same. We have P4, strong FDG positivity, mild SSTR positivity, chemotherapy plus or minus, and you can use PRRT. P5, positive PET, FDG PET, and negative SSTR PET. Interpretation is only chemotherapy. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Evading growth suppressors. You know the it evades growth suppressor. How? Let us see. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So, growth suppression. Normally, there are growth suppressors by which the dividing tumor is stopped. But because these tumors evade growth suppression, there is elevation of thymidylate kinase enzyme. Why we are using thymidylate kinase? The tumors cause too much of thymidylate kinase to be secreted. So what will happen? Because the tumor is evading growth suppressors, it continuously divides. How will we know which is dividing cell or not? By using some analog which is used for DNA replication. The DNA replication needs adenine, guanine, cytosine, thymine. But thymine is only specific for DNA, whereas all others are specific for all others are non-specific, can be used in DNA synthesis and RNA synthesis also. So when we use thymidylate kinase 1, F18 fluoro-labeled thymidine, when we have F18 fluoro-labeled thymidine, it goes and binds to the enzyme, gets cleaved by the enzyme thymidylate kinase, and it can be incorporated into the DNA. It is a surrogate marker for DNA synthesis. So wherever because there is a tumor, the unlimited replication is present, labeled thymidine goes to the dividing cells, and especially in the cancer cells. Choline kinase, F18 choline or C11 choline. You know, for the membrane synthesis, you need choline. That is why we are using choline. Amino acid transporters, what I already spoke about DOPA, that is dihydroxyphenylalanine in brain tumors, is because there is overexpression of amino acid uptake. So that AAT, amino acid transporters, overexpression in tumors because it needed for protein synthesis. So for the cell to divide, it needs choline, it needs DNA, and it needs amino acids. So these are overexpressed in tumors, by which their FLT, if it is only expressed in the dividing cells. That's why the marrow will show uptake. Choline is expressed in the tumors or wherever there is membrane synthesis. So wherever there is membrane synthesis, choline is expressed. Like this, we are targeting another hallmark of cancer. Next slide, please. Next slide. See, evading growth suppressors. The growth suppressors are evaded. That's why there is unlimited replication potential. These are Jaggi's pyrimidine analog, that is nothing but labeled thymidine analog. These are different hematopoietic conditions, where the tumor where the FLT goes, and we can differentiate different conditions. Here, when we come here, it is a normal distribution of this thing, and when we come here, there is a gross splenomegaly in myelofibrosis, and you can see there is a extramedullary hematopoiesis. Each one will show a different character, and this is more of hematology. I'll talk in the next coming lectures how each scan to be interpreted. Next slide, please. Angiogenesis. See, if you see tumors have continuous vascular proliferation. That's why we are using bevacizumab. All drugs which we are using, bevacizumab, ramucirumab, all these are nothing but they are blocking VEGF. The VEGF is overexpressed in tumors. What happens is in vascular endothelial growth factor, this thing, the more and more tumors, when they outgrow their vascularity, there will be hypoxia. The clear cell carcinoma is nothing but it is called hypernephroma because there will be a lot of angiogenesis. Angiogenesis is a hallmark of cancer. Your drugs which you are using, in the last thing I was saying, pyrimidine analogs can be used by your FLT. We are using for imaging. The pyrimidine analogs you are using for therapy. Purine analogs you are using for therapy. So like that only, angiogenesis inhibitors also you are using therapy. Next slide. So integrin alpha to beta 5, F18 galacto RGD binds to this integrin. VEGF1, vascular endothelial growth factor 1. Bevacizumab goes and binds to VEGF1. Perfusion, too much of perfusion. Oxygen 15H2O. PSMA, I already spoke. It is prostate-specific membrane antigen. It is a misnomer. It is glutamate carboxypeptidase, which is overexpressed again in neovascularized tissue. That's why PSMA also binds to the neovascularized tissue. So this RGD or F18 galacto RGD is nothing but a peptide, arginine glycine deaspartate. Bevacizumab is monoclonal antibody which is targeting VEGF. So you are using in therapeutic doses, we are using in diagnostic doses. All of us, whether for therapy or diagnosis, we are targeting a hallmark of cancer. That hallmark of cancer is nothing but neoangiogenesis. So next slide, please. So neoangiogenesis, galacto RGD binds to VEGF. The drug is bevacizumab. Next slide, please. So the PSMA, last session when you were asking about PSMA, it is a galactocarboxypeptidase enzyme overexpressed in neovascular tissue, more so in prostate. And this expression is 100 to 1000 times higher in prostatic cancer. It is also expressed in normal prostatic epithelium, small intestine, renal tubular cells, salivary glands. Based on this, we will know the biodistribution. The nuclear medicine doctor is one who knows biodistribution, anatomy, and the third thing is based on the what drugs and what human metabolism can do these to biodistribution of these radiopharmaceuticals. Nothing but nuclear medicine, good nuclear medicine physician who is interested in imaging knows biodistribution and the effects of other conditions on the biodistribution. Next slide, please. So PSMA negative, this is a normal cell. In a PSMA, in a cancer cell, PSMA is overexpressed. This is glutamate carboxypeptide. It is a transmembrane protein. The transmembrane protein means it has extracellular component, membranous component, and an intracellular component. Next slide, please. So this is with the therapy based on the actinium therapy. So and lutetium therapy. See, this is a patient with the prostatic cancer. This is a normal distribution. As I said, the PSMA is expressed in the salivary glands. So salivary glands and lacrimal glands are showing uptake. It is expressed in the small intestine. It is showing uptake. It is excreted through the kidneys, and this sometimes the spleen also shows a significant amount of excretion, significant amount of localization. And this patient, prostate cancer, PSA more than 294, after giving 2 cycles, it is further progressed. But upon treatment with actinium PSMA, that is alpha particle emission, and after 3 cycles, it is PSA is decreased or undetectable PSA. So this patient is this is what we are targeting. That is a PSMA which is overexpressed in prostate cancer. It is also present in neovascularization tissue. So this we are targeting another hallmark of cancer, that is neovascularization. Next. I already said about it. Type 2 transmembrane protein, glutamate carboxylase. It is associated with aggressive disease and present in solid tumor neovascularization, marker of androgen signaling, which I have already said. So this is the intracellular component, there is extracellular component, and there is a transmembrane component. Previously, we were targeting intracellular component. That is why most of the prostate cancer, which we were previously using indium prostacint, that is called as indium 111 prostacint, which was targeting intracellular component was not successful. Now we are concentrating extracellular component, and this gets internalized once it binds to it. It is nothing but an enzyme inhibitor which we are concentrating. Next slide, please. Next, the resisting cell death. I asked already. I said about the hallmarks of cancer: self-sufficiency in growth signal, evasion of growth suppressors, then neovascularization, and the next thing, resisting cell death, evasion of apoptosis. So what we are targeting is we are targeting most of the cancer cells, they evade apoptosis. To stimulate that apoptosis, we are giving immunotherapy. Next slide, please. So caspase-3 it binds to F18, ICF2. It is a double-edged sword. Caspase is, you know, there are two types of apoptotic pathways, and caspase is key role in the phosphatidyl F18 and anexin 5. This binds phosphatidylserine, but phosphatidylserine is normally inside the membrane. But when the tumor undergoes apoptosis, it expressed on outside. Next slide, please. So phosphatidylserine in apoptosis, you see normal cell, no phosphatidylserine on surface. So whereas apoptotic cell, so it is present on the intrasite towards the cytoplasm. But apoptotic cell, the phosphatidylserine binds to the extracellular surfaces. So the apoptotic or necrotic cell membrane, phosphatidylserine is on surface membrane and it disintegrates. So we are going and imaging phosphatidylserine. As the annexin 5 can't go inside the cell, so it will not localize. But when the phosphatidylserine is on the surface, it can go and localize. So we will know whether what treatment we are giving, is it leading to apoptosis or not, by using F18 labeled or technetium labeled annexin 5. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah. Resisting death, I already said, it avoids amyloidosis. The other thing is avoiding immune destruction. If you know, if you are reading the new thing that is immune therapy, the PD-L1 and PD-1, programmed cell death inhibitor, programmed death ligand. Normally, these tumors to avoid or evade destruction by the immune system, they behave or they mimic like normal cells. Next slide, please. So deoxycytidine kinase or substrate for cytidine kinase. Deficiency of deoxycytidine kinase as a resistant mechanism to many anti-cancer drugs as well. Deficiency also prevents immune-mediated destruction. So because of the deficiency of cytidine kinase, there will immune destruction, that is expression of PD-L1 and PD-L1 also is changed, and this will lead to many of the cancers which are resistant to many anti-cancer drugs is because of cytidine kinase deficiency. We are using FAC. It is a substrate for that is nothing but arabinofurantosyl adenine. If it is, we express it, we inject it, and those tumors which are having cytidine kinase goes and localizes. Whereas those tumors which are not having adequate amount of cytidine kinase do not localize this, saying making that suggesting that they are resistant clones. Next slide. Labeled PD-1 and PD-L1 agonists. That is mini body imaging. That is nothing but programmed death inhibitor. So I am saying it evades the tumor cells evade destruction. That can be because if normal cells are expressing PD-1 and the tumor cells are the immune the immune destructing cells, that is T cells, are expressing PD-L1. When PD-1 and PD-L1 they bind together, what will happen? It thinks this is a native cell and it will stop killing it. But once we use PD-1 blocking antibodies like pembrolizumab, nivolumab and all. So this goes and binds there so that the lymphocytes and will identify this as a non-normal cell and they start killing. So we are using these agonists and antagonists to say whether they are evading the immune destructive pathway. Next slide, please. enabling replicative immortality. So the DNA has at the end, telomerase. The telomerase is very small, or telomerase stops. Telomerase reverse transcriptase. The telomerase makes the DNA to think it stopped to this. It's time to stop dividing. But in tumor cells, telomerase is overexpressed. So there will be telomerase reverse transcriptase is we can image the reverse by binding. It is a normally telomerase is there. We have an antisense oligonucleotide. So this goes and binds to the telomerase. So based on that, to the cancer cells which have continuous enabling immortality, they continuously divide. So we are going to target the telomerase. The telomerase can be targeted by using an antisense oligonucleotide. It is called ASON, antisense oligonucleotide. This, if it is radio labeled, it is called as RASEN imaging. That is radio labeled antisense oligonucleotide. This is how we detect that one of the another hallmark of cancer, that is replicative immortality, RASEN imaging. Next slide, please. Telomerase, technetium 99, M technetium, and netason, nothing but radio labeled antisense oligonucleotide imaging. CD133, it is also expressed in stem cells. The presence of CD133 says it is a stem cell, and we can use copper 64 nota is a chelating agent, which another anti-chimeric antibody against 133, and we can say whether that tumor, whether that the cells are having limitless replicative potential. Next slide, please. Invasion and metastasis. Now, if you see, you will have a high grade tumor in the tonsil, which will not have any metastasis. Another tumor, same tonsil, same squamous cell carcinoma, but it will have metastasis. If you see the SUVs, or if you see the lesion size and all, that there may be some small lesions also expressing metastasis. There will be another big lesion which is not expressing metastasis. The invasion and metastasis not only depend on the size and the size of the lesion and aggressiveness, but there are other factors which causes metastasis. Like example is chemokine receptors. Those tumors expressing chemokine receptors, they disintegrate from the the primary site and go and cause embolus at other site. Next slide, please. So they cause colonization. The colonization, see, you can see that vascular, they are entering into the vasculature and causing colonization. This dormancy to colonization, it is because of the other mediators. The other mediators which are like CXCR4, that is chemokine receptor 4, which can be easily labeled and imaged with gallium-68 pentoxifere. We image this hallmark of the cancer also, invasion and metastasis. Those tumors which metastasize, they express too much of CXCR4. At present, it is in a novel strategy. In future, we know which tumor has the potential to metastasize and which tumors do not metastasize. We can predict. It's like a molecular markers. If you see in breast cancer, you have a 17 gene panel saying that those expressing these genes tend to metastasize. Those expressing these genes do not tend to metastasize. Next slide. So CXCR4, this is a chemokine receptor 4. This can be labeled with gallium-68 pentoxifere, c-Met HGFR, that is hepatocyte growth factor receptor. Those tumors which are expressing hepatocyte growth factor receptor also have intense, those tumors which are having intense HGF avidity to the HGFR receptors, they have high propensity to metastasize. It can be the hepatocyte growth factor receptor can be labeled with effective label. This is a novel compound. That's why it is the trial compound name is there. So once these compounds can be used, and we can predict which malignancy can metastasize and which cannot metastasize. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So already I have spoken to the classical hallmarks. Now, what are the emerging hallmarks? Deregulated cellular energetics, genomic instability and mutation, avoiding immune destruction, I already said, and tumor promoting inflammation. Avoiding immune destruction, that is what we are targeting with immune therapy. Now let us go to the cellular energetics. Next slide, please. Next slide. GLUT1. The examples are glucose transporter like FDG, acetate metabolism with C11 acetate, glutamine metabolism with F18 glutamine. These are the targets, but let us see one by one. Next slide, please. This is the beauty of molecular imaging. See, this is what is called as Warburg's effect. This is in differentiated tissue or in a normal tissue. In the presence of oxygen, glucose is converted into pyruvate. The pyruvate is predominantly enters into the Krebs cycle. Pyruvate converts into acetyl-CoA, and acetyl-CoA enters into the Krebs cycle, and where carbon dioxide is released. It leads to, this is called as oxidative phosphorylation. One glucose molecule will give 36 molecules of ATP per molecule of glucose. Whereas in absence of oxygen, the same tissue, glucose is converted into pyruvate, the pyruvate is converted into lactate. This is called as anaerobic glycolysis. This is the normal tissue. But what happens in a proliferative tissue or tumor or the other thing is macrophages? Glucose is converted into pyruvate. Pyruvate only 5%. Here 95% oxidative phosphorylation. Here only 5% is going into oxidative phosphorylation. 85% is getting converted into lactate. Another 10% goes to the glucose 6-phosphate pathway. So even in the presence or absence of oxygen, which is most important, this is the 7th hallmark of cancer. This will lead to aerobic glycolysis. This is called as Warburg effect. Next slide, please. This is the main basis for tumor. Energy metabolism in normal cells, substrate level phosphorylation only gives rise to 5.5% glucose to pyruvate conversion. Another, the pyruvate converts into pyruvate dehydrogenase, converts into acetyl-CoA. In acetyl-CoA enters into citric acid cycle by binding to oxaloacetate. It becomes citrate, isocitrate. Isocitrate converts in isocitrate dehydrogenase, converts into alpha ketoglutarate, glutarate, malate, and again oxaloacetate pathway. Only 5.5. But predominantly the metabolism is through electron transport chain, and that leads to 89% or 90% of ATP production. That is in energy metabolism in normal cells. Next slide, please. Energy metabolism in cancer cells, 20% is substrate metabolism in the cytoplasm. Another 75% is substrate metabolism in the Krebs cycle. For Krebs cycle, pyruvate is not going to acetyl-CoA. So how it is producing ATP? That is because it takes up glutamine. Glutamine enters into the Krebs cycle because into glutarate. That is why if you see the cancer patient will be losing protein loss, glucose loss. That's why there will be cancer cachexia. The cancer cachexia is because of this change in metabolism. This change in metabolism is the most important hallmark of cancer, and electron transport change contributes to only 5%. So the substrate level phosphorylation, both because of glucose and glutamine, will lead to utilization of more glucose, more glutamine, and production of less energy. Next slide, please. So in energy metabolism in normal cells and cancer cells, the predominantly 90% of ATP is produced by normal cells through electron transport change, whereas in cancer cells it is only 5%. See, if many students ask me, sir, if it is predominantly electron transport chain doesn't contribute to cancer cells, we see a lot of mitochondria in cancer cells. Why? The reason is because Krebs cycle also gives part to substrate level phosphorylation, which is contributing to 75% of ATP. So the powerhouse still remains mitochondria. But in mitochondria, it is not the electron transport chain in the cancer cells. It is the Krebs cycle by substrate level phosphorylation. Because of this, glutamine is consumed more. So the glucose and glutamine consumption is very high in cancer cells. That's why it leads to first is glycogenolysis, then lipolysis, and then proteolysis. And the glutamine, too much of glutamine is taken up by the Krebs cycle pathway and this surface substrate level phosphorylation. If you understand this slide, this is more than enough. This is the reason Warburg effect, and because of this only, the patient will develop cancer, cachexia, anorexia and all. Because of this, there is too much of lactic acid. The lactic acid is nothing but the pH changes. Once the pH changes, there will be no appetite. Whether this is the beginning, see, there is, if you go through the Warburg effect and other concepts, whether change in metabolism is the beginning of cancer or the cancer causes change in metabolism is still a debating topic. It is a very interesting thing. If you read Nature reviews metabolism, it is all this crux, the crux of cancer. Now, future cancer research will be dealt with metabolism. Next slide. So, what causes Warburg effect? See, as I already said, whether Warburg effect causes tumors or tumors cause Warburg effect is a matter of debate. It's like hen is the beginning or egg is the beginning. Tumor microenvironment, oncogenes stimulate Warburg effect. Example, HIF1 alpha, that is hypoxia inducible factor 1 alpha. Mitochondrial dysfunction, that is disruption of electron transport chain for whatever cause it is. Nuclear DNA mutations, epigenetic modifications, and glutamine metabolism, post-translation modifications, and microRNA, all these contribute to Warburg effect in one or the other way, which is interesting, but more interesting in a metabolic. If I was taking class to a metabolic person, it is more interesting. But at present, the crux is Warburg effect. The Warburg effect will lead to the glucose metabolism. This is the base for PET-CT imaging. FDG PET-CT. Next slide. Next slide. So genes that stimulate Warburg effect. You will be knowing when you read your Pares. Glucose converts to glucose 6-phosphate by enzyme exokinase. This HIF1 alpha, that is called as hypoxia inducible factor 1 alpha or CMYC, they stimulate glucose to be trapped inside the cell by overexpression of insulin independent glucose transporters, and CMYC also stimulate glucose 6-phosphate into glycolysis. And that HIF1 alpha, the pyruvate to convert to acetyl-CoA needs an enzyme pyruvate dehydrogenase kinase. The HIF1 alpha stimulates pyruvate dehydrogenase kinase. Because of the stimulation of pyruvate dehydrogenase kinase, the pyruvate dehydrogenase is cleaved. Once the pyruvate dehydrogenase is cleaved, the pyruvate cannot go to acetyl-CoA, so the pyruvate will go into form lactate. Because of this, there is lactic acidosis. Because there is lactate, the LDH is pyruvate to convert to lactate, it needs LDH. The increased production of LDH is stimulated by HIF1 alpha and CMYC. So CMYC expressing tumors express too much of LDH, and CMYC expressing tumors also express too much of exokinase. So these, why the cancer cells behave like this? See, unless the cell feels there is too much of pyruvate, the cell cannot send metabolism towards pentose phosphate pathway. The pentose phosphate pathway is the needed for production of DNA and RNA. If the glucose 6-phosphate has to enter into the DNA and RNA pathway, that is pentose and phosphate pathway, also called as HMP shunt pathway, to produce ribose and deoxyribose, it should feel that there is adequate pyruvate. This is the basis. That's why how we can see that excess pyruvate by preventing pyruvate to convert to acetyl-CoA. How is it prevented? By cleaving the enzyme pyruvate dehydrogenase. How is it? How PDH is cleaved? By pyruvate dehydrogenase kinase. What makes pyruvate dehydrogenase kinase stimulate PDH? That is HIF1 alpha. That is hypoxia inducible factor 1 alpha. Next slide, please. So this HIF1 alpha induces aerobic glycolysis. That is because of a stimulation of pyruvate dehydrogenase kinase, exokinase 2, and all these things. Next slide, please. So this is glutamine convert into alpha ketoglutarate. That is the basis for substrate level phosphorylation in mitochondria. Because of the substrate level phosphorylation in mitochondria, though the mitochondria still remains the powerhouse of the cancer cell, it is not the electron transport chain, but it is the substrate level phosphorylation happening in the cytosol as well as in the mitochondria, which is giving energy. But the electron transport chain is that's why there is a lot of glucose consumption and lot of glutamine consumption. Next slide, please. That's why they say fasting, because if you see, there is a real concept of intermittent fasting. When there is intermittent fasting, the glucose levels are low. When the glucose levels are low, their Warburg effect producing cancer cells cannot survive. All these things, again, I am talking if you see, phosphoinositol 3 kinase pathway or AKT pathway stimulates glucose transporter. It stimulates hexokinase. It stimulates fructokinase. And P53, if you see P53, see if you glucose 6-phosphate is converted to 6-phosphogluconate and 6-phosphogluconate is converted to ribose 5-phosphate. If you read P53, it is a tumor suppressor gene. P53 blocks NADP to NADPH, indirectly blocking a pentose phosphate shunt pathway. That's why ribose 5-phosphate is not produced. So there is no cell division happening, because ribose 5-phosphate is crucial for nucleotide synthesis. So the P53 loss, pentose phosphate pathway, P53 tumor suppressor gene is lost. Then there is stimulation. There is a lot of conversion into ribose 5-phosphate, and this is the problem here. So P50 loss of tumor P53 leads to lot of production of ribose 5-phosphate. Because there is ribose 5-phosphate, there is continuous cell division. So MYC converts glutamate into alpha ketoglutarate, again stimulating substrate level phosphorylation. So the genes are altering the metabolism. Because the metabolism is altering, there is cell division. Next slide. So this nothing but, now I said the tumor cells concentrate lot of glucose because they produce one molecule of glucose only produces 2 molecules of ATP by substrate phosphorylation. That's why there is 19 times more glucose accumulation in normal cells, in tumor cells compared to normal cells, and they express insulin independent glucose transporters. So there will be a lot of glucose uptake even in the fasting state. That's why when the patient is having overnight fasting, the tumor cells concentrate, whereas the normal cells cannot. So this increases the signal to noise ratio. This is now glucose, a hydroxyl ion. The second hydroxyl ion is replaced by fluorine 18. That's why 2-deoxy fluoro D-glucose. Next slide, please. So how come glucose cannot be glucose converts into pyruvate, whereas FDG cannot convert into pyruvate? The simple reason is the glucose converted into glucose 6-phosphate by an enzyme hexokinase. Glucose 6-phosphate converts into 6-phosphate and it enters into the glycolytic pathway. The enzyme needed for glucose 6-phosphate to conversion into fructose 6-phosphate is an enzyme called as hexose phosphate isomerase, that is stereospecific. It identifies glucose and FDG as separate, whereas FDG, when it converts into FDG 6-phosphate, it cannot undergo further metabolism because hexose phosphate isomerase is stereospecific. That's why FDG remains inside the cell without either going out or without entering into the glycolytic pathway. Next slide. So the glutamine, I already said, it is a glutamine converts into alpha ketoglutarate for substrate level phosphorylation. Next slide, please. Next slide. So this already I said glucose and glutamine. I am emphasizing these too many slides is to emphasize the role of glucose and glutamine in cancer pathway. And now coming to the lactate, that's why you have a non-specific tumor marker lactate dehydrogenase, because lactate has to be pyruvate to lactate conversion need LDH. So that's why you have lactate dehydrogenase elevation. Next slide. So tumor inflammation, any inflammation, there will be macrophages. That's why FDG and FDG labeled WBCs, tumor causes inflammation. That's why if you see a Hodgkin's lymphoma or any other cancer, if by giving steroids, did you ever imagine that whatever you are using, that only I am talking. you give steroids. Even if there is a impending card compression, you give steroids. Even if there is a in the lymphomas, steroid is one of the drug in the protocol. R-CHOP, prednisolone is there like that only. Why? Because the tumor stimulates inflammation. If you take lymphoma, the number of lymphoma cells will be only 3 to 4% or 10%. The rest of the cells are inflammatory cells. Because of this inflammatory cells only, you are going to you are giving steroids. Even in brain tumors, you are giving steroids to decrease both vasogenic edema as well as tumor associated inflammation. If you say a tumor will cause inflammation and is the hallmark of cancer, you will say I never heard of it. But the tumor inflammation is an emerging hallmark and we are targeting since ages without knowing that. Next slide, please. FDG, because it goes and localizes in macrophages. FDG also is a surrogate marker for tumor inflammation. And FDG labeled WBCs. That is, you can label WBCs with fluorodeoxyglucose and they can say what amount of the cells are what amount of cells are tumor because of tumor inflammation, and we can separate in future, not now, in future we can say separate. If you have a big lymph node, we can say what is the constituent of that lymph node by tumor cells and what is the constituent by the inflammatory cells. Next slide, please. So, inflammation, activate macrophages, which lead to inflammatory markers and chronic inflammation, amplification of the inflammatory markers. This inflammation also stimulates oncogene activation, stimulates inflammation, and infections, inflammatory diseases also cause oncogene activation. So, inflammation and oncogene activation are oncogene activation can cause inflammation, it is also cause oncogene activation. So that's why a chronic irritation can cause malignancies. A chronic Barrett's will lead to adenocarcinoma. Here, what is the trigger of chronic inflammation? That's why you know that many of the viruses are causing.
Hello. Your voice is not audible clearly. The voice is breaking.
It's both the infectious and inflammatory diseases. When there is inflammation, they stimulate activation of macrophages. This activation of macrophages causes chronic application of the inflammatory response, leading to inflammatory markers. These inflammatory markers stimulate, they cause oncogene activation. So the both oncogene activation can lead to inflammation, and inflammation can lead to oncogene activation. So this is a what we call that cycle. This is this thing. So where either of them can cause inflammation, can cause malignancy, and malignancy can cause inflammation. Next slide. So now immortality, we have talked about third. We can resist it. We can talk about these are the 9 hallmarks of cancer. Immortality, I talked about third, telomerase reverse transcriptase. I talked about autonomy, that is self-sufficiency in growth signaling. Checkpoint escape, I talked about immune pathway. Angiogenesis, we have spoken about bevacizumab and galacto-RGD. Inflammation, we have already spoke. Normal cells, the carcinogenesis, established tumors, chronic inflammation. And chronic inflammation also can lead normal cells to carcinogenesis. Spoke about metabolism, which is very important. Genomic instability, I talk about. Immune escape and invasion, I said about chemokinesis. Part 4. Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
Sir, just check your audio. It is a bit rough.
Are you able to hear me now?
Sir, you're audible, but it is not clear. Little bit. Just check it.
I think it's a problem with the network or my system. I don't know. I'm sorry for that. Okay. These are the 10 hallmarks of cancer. The classical teaching of 6 hallmarks of cancer is gone. Now coming to the genomic instability, you would have heard of PARP, poly-ADP ribose inhibitors. PARP, PARP you are using in ovarian cancer, BRCA positive breast cancer, in prostate cancer also. PARP is used. The genomic instability, this is one of the hallmarks of cancer which I have not covered. Next slide, please. So the hypoxia is also because of this only. F18 mesonidazole I was talking about. Genomic instability is because of hypoxia also. Hypoxia can lead to genomic instability. Genomic instability can lead to hypoxia. F18 mesonidazole, copper 64 ATSM, and carbonic anhydrase 9. This is another beautiful marker. I124CG250. That is, this is called girentuximab. This is used in imaging. This is used in imaging renal cell carcinomas, as renal cell carcinomas express lot of carbonic anhydrase 9, and the PARP is poly-ADP ribose phosphate. This also causes genomic instability. We are already using olaparib, but whether the tumor is having genomic instability, whether the patient will respond to olaparib and all, we can use with F18 AGO 14361, which goes and binds when there is polyadiporibose phosphate. It goes and binds there. So by saying that, we can say whether the tumor patient will respond to olaparib or not. Next slide. So these are the different things. What I mean to say, hallmarks of cancer, which we are going, which we have dealt in detail. EGFR inhibitors, cyclin-dependent kinase inhibitors. EGFR inhibitors sustain proliferative signaling, and cyclin-dependent kinase inhibitors, they avoid growth suppressors, avoid immune destruction, immune activating anti-CLTL4 monoclonal antibodies. Telomerase inhibitors, TERT, I have already talked about. They enable replicative immortality. Tumor inflammation, I have talked about. Activating invasion and metastasis, that is hepatocyte growth factor, I spoke about. I also spoke about CXCR4. Inducing angiogenesis, I spoke about inhibitors of VEGF signaling. Genomic stability, PARP inhibitors. So what you are doing is, you are targeting this with molecules. What I am doing is targeting this with radio-labeled pharmaceuticals to know. We are diagnosing whether these tumors are expressing these things, and you are giving therapy. EGFR inhibitors, you know, you are using erlotinib, geftinib, and what all this thing. Cyclin-dependent kinase inhibitors, at present you are not using. Immune activating, you are using pembrolizumab, nivolumab, and all. Telomerase inhibitors you have, and anti-inflammatory drugs, steroids. And in using angiogenesis, you are having bevacizumab, nivolumab, bevacizumab, ramucirumab, and all. PARP inhibitors, you have olaparib. Aerobic, these are the three things which I am interested in. Aerobic glycolysis inhibitors, they are not yet been used. Pro-apoptotic BH3 mimetics, still not in use. Select and inhibitors of HGF mutation, these are three things are not still in use, which will be the future of therapy in cancer. Next slide. So this is the final slide. In last 2-3 slides, I'll finish it. The molecular imaging explores the hallmarks of cancer biology. This is called as virtual biopsy. VEGF receptors, bevacizumab, apoptosis, annexin. This is glutamine is because of this is called small chain transporters, and FDG, glucose metabolism, choline synthetic pathway, fluoroethyl tyrosine, L-amino transporter pathway, gallium tautonox somatostatin receptor binding, and DOPA. This is because of again amino acid transporter or upward mechanism, and FLT, that is thymidine kinase. All these are the drugs. In the green are all red or FDA approved, like FDG, choline, FACBC, gallium dotatate, and all. And in green are in clinical trials. Star marker, radionuclide therapy, and theranostics. PSMA is in the theranostic, lutetium, actinium also is in theranostic. And this is a simple slide. If you can understand this slide, my 1 hour of hard work will be useful. These are the agents which we use to get virtual biopsy done. Next slide. Is it only theory, or do we have application in trials? Because what all I was speaking, people feel it is only theory. What are we really doing it? Next slide, please. Multicenter FLT PET trial, CDK4/5/6 inhibitor in mantle cell lymphoma. So FLT PET, it is showing, whereas after cycle 1, there is reduction in 43% on unlimited replication potential, whereas the metabolism did not change after cycle 1, only 7% decrease. That is because there is associated inflammation also. If with FDG you are imaging not only tumor but also inflammation. But with FLT you are imaging only tumor. You can see a nice thing. So it really differentiates tumor from inflammation. In combining with FLT and FDG, you can say whether the tumor is responding faster or not. Next slide. This is already, I spoke it. FLT response versus time to progression. Those who are FLT PET responders, the time to progression was a lot, and those who are not responding, and this is this thing. FLT, if I say FLT, it will be Greek and Latin. But if I say Ka index, it is common. The FLT is nothing but a surrogate marker of Ki67. What you are seeing in pathology, that is Ki67 in the in vitro lab, not in what we are doing with in vivo with FLT PET. Next slide. So what is it? The same pharmaceutical. If we have a radioactive isotope, it is an immunoscience link that is called as chelating agent. We have a cancer target. We have a targeting agent. If this is used either a gamma emitter or a positron emitter, it becomes diagnostic. If it's a beta emitter or alpha emitter, it becomes therapeutic. Thera plus diagnostic. If you are using bevacizumab, it is plain. If you are using F18 galacto RGD, the VEGF is the cancer target, RGD is the targeting agent, galacto is the nanoscience link, and F18 is a radioactive isotope. Like that only zirconium 99 89 DFO bevacizumab. Bevacizumab is the target agent. DFO, that is desferoxamine, is a chelating agent, is a nanoscience link, and zirconium 89 is a radioactive isotope. If I replace zirconium with lutetium, it becomes therapeutic. So diagnostic and therapeutic with molecules. It is therapeutic or diagnostic. This is called theranostic. There is also journals with theranostics, which is another interesting part. Next slide, please. So previously bones turnover in skeletal metastasis, you are using F18 fluoride. This is a bone scan. The same thing we are using radium for therapy, alpha emitter, Alsimca trial, samarium, strontium, all for therapy. Samarium and strontium are beta emitters. Radium is an alpha emitter. F18 fluoride is a positron emitter. Technetium MDP is a gamma emitter. So for imaging, technetium or F18. For treatment, samarium and strontium, which are beta emitters, radium, which is alpha emitter, iodine 131 is the single agent which can be useful both for diagnosis as well as therapy. Somatostatin, gallium 68 is a dotatate, is used for diagnostic. Gallium is a positron emitter, lutetium is a beta emitter, actinium is an alpha emitter, or bismuth is an alpha emitter. So this is diagnostic and therapeutic. The combination of a molecule, if it is replaced by the radioisotope, which can be used both as diagnostic and therapeutic, we call it as theranostics. Norepinephrine transporter, MIBG, I-123 MIBG and I-131 MIBG. And PSMA, we already know F18 PSMA. We use lutetium for diagnostic and actinium for therapeutic purpose. Next slide. Thank you. Difference between a quack and doctor is the latter knows why and how, the former doesn't know. Choice is ours. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. It's a difficult lecture. The simple reason is, okay, that's so. Because more theoretical part, and in Raksha Bandhan it came as Shivratri. So I wanted to emphasize whatever you are treating is based on the hallmarks of cancer, and that hallmarks of cancer is based on and we target those hallmarks of cancer. Thank you. Any questions? Please, I am ready to answer.
Thank you, sir. It was really a wonderful class and really very nicely explained. Sir, I had just one question.
Yeah. You please ask.
Sir, can that we differentiate on like in nuclear medicine the different types of histologies like adenos, squamous, and is there any method we can do, or is it like
no?
Can that
As of now, no. As of now, with the available isotopes, no. But squamous cell carcinomas predominantly have higher SUVs because most of the squamous cell carcinomas express HAF1 alpha. But it is based on the SUV or cutoff or this thing, we cannot. As of now, no. As far as my knowledge goes, no.
Okay, sir. Any other questions? Please unmute and ask.
Okay, next time onwards, I'll give images and show you how it helps in radiotherapy. Maybe that is what people are expecting. I'll do an RT planning class.
Okay, sir. So, yes. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much.